we're probably going to continue this this concept after the summer. But then not just Oracle people, but also maybe some other.
Sure.
So
yeah, other technologies and stuff.
Yeah, maybe some I don't know, Google. Maybe Microsoft. I don't know what they're planning.
Absolutely.
But trying to put in some Oracle stuff there. So
okay,
if you're up for another talk,
sure,
let's talk.
Okay. Do you want to get started?
Yeah, we got 7 people.
Okay.
Wouter, I'm going to put you on mute again.
Do that.
Sorry.
No.
And yeah, we'll just start. Welcome everybody to the next episode of Meet the Oracle Masters with my good friend Jim Czuprynski. I was supposed to say my favorite Oracle Master of the day, but he's actually really a good friend. And he's going to be talking about JSON, a splash of soda, and the SQL chaser, real-world use cases for Autonomous JSON Database. I think you've got the prize for the longest title in the entire series.
No extra charge.
Okay, very good. If you're ready, take over the screen and take it away, Jim.
I will. Here we go. Good morning, everybody. Well, good evening, good afternoon for you. So nice to be here. Thanks for the chance to share with everybody on this. I think that as time goes on here, especially with JSON, where it's positioned in the marketplace, I think that the information we're going to have here will be valuable to you in the near future. Anyway, we're going to be talking all about AJD today, Autonomous JSON Database. And let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I basically, these days, spend a lot of my time speaking virtually. That's going to change. Co-authored a few books. I've got an ACE directorship, whatever that means. I'm a OCP, but really what it's all about is more about me. I spend most of my winters in Illinois. Just to the north is the wonderful state of Wisconsin. So I spend a lot of my summertime there, heading up in a couple more days. We have a little cabin up there. My wife and I are avid amateur bird watchers. This was actually a picture we took in the Galapagos, actually, in Ecuador. I'm also a little bit of an athlete. As you can see from my pictures, I'm not a very good skier, cyclist, or martial artist, okay? I'm just usually on the receiving end of mistakes. And yeah, actually that cyclist picture, I had just come back from the emergency room after breaking my collarbone. Anyway, here's my contact information. If you'd like to reach out to me about any of the topics I'm going to cover today, follow me on Twitter. I usually have some interesting insights into everything from the American political scene to things Oracle to things technology. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn. Enough about me. Let's get to the meat of things. Here we go. So one of the interesting things is that as things go today, let me just clean up my screen a little bit here so I can see things better. There we go. Is that things are changing dramatically. Things are really getting different, right, in terms of what's going on with JSON. So a sea change is really underway in a lot of IT organizations, right? Big data is everywhere. Right? We've all seen MongoDB. I had a chance to play with nonJS for a little bit last summer, actually for an election campaign I was helping with here in the United States. The Internet of Things is already here, no question about it. In fact, last summer and this fall, I spent time with a Raspberry Pi, right there. I built my own home alarm system, right, for monitoring one of my remote properties that I have. But ultimately, right, we're going to start seeing a lot more documents, images, yeah, right? Closed circuit television and things like that are getting much more popular, and we would call meter data or smart meter data. especially from public utilities here in the US, right? I have a smart meter in my home, which gives the utility the ability to consequently monitor how I'm using power in my home. And if it so desires, it'll give me a discount for using less power. And so, you know, this big data trend, which is being headed up by JSON, is quite obvious. I actually pulled this slide from an earlier presentation. I didn't know that it was actually a presentation from July of 2016, if I remember correctly. So yeah, I was rather surprised by all that when I saw that, because wow, oh, July 2015. Okay, so I'm 6 years old, right? But this is what I was projecting about JSON in 2015. Here's the reality today, right? JSON's everywhere. It's being used for NoSQL databases, but especially MongoDB. We're going to talk a little bit about MongoDB a little bit later today. This is what it was as of March 2021, so a few months old, right? It's the standard for interchanging data between APIs and microservices. I have a session that maybe, I don't know if I did it for you folks or if you may have seen it already, for geolocation on using Apex, right? And I used an API to call a microservice to get geographic information, right? For geolocation, for geocoding of addresses. You can use underneath the covers, really, all maps in geographic applications are really typically GeoJSON documents, right? Geographic information stored inside JSON. If you're doing streaming today, right? Almost every place I go, they're using JSON to exchange information. The Oracle streaming service is a good example. And why should you be interested in this? Well, if you're a developer, and I don't care if you're a DBA, you're a developer today. We're all developers, is what it comes down to. The best part of this is I don't need to go to, if you remember your Monty Python, right? These are the Gumbies, the professors, right? These are your DBAs. I don't need to ask them all kinds of things like, can I add or remove a column? Can I change data structure? I don't need their permission to do it. Doesn't mean we shouldn't have standards, but on the other hand, I don't need to worry about things like foreign keys, building a detailed data model. We should, but it's not that restrictive. So let's take a look at a typical JSON document. If you haven't worked with JSON, fine, you'll appreciate this. If you have, permission to nap for a few minutes. This is a typical JSON document. Typically, it's nothing more than string value pair. So you can see here, I've got an ID, column, or really a string, a key, and a corresponding value, a first name, a last name. Also notice I can embed an array. You see those red brackets, not OG brackets. That's what starts and ends certain things, right? But you can see that I've got a biodata array consisting of blood type and a few other values. We'll show you that. And then a little bit later in here, look, I've got another one that's actually another array with multiple string value pairs within it. This is basically, if you will, passenger flight data, right? This is all fake data, by the way. Sharon Locklear, who lives in Alabama, that's her nationality. Okay, that's one of our states, right? Southern state, as we say, right? All this information, again, not real information, but this is the kind of stuff you would see for a typical plane flight, right? Flight departing airport coded as DCR and arriving in another airport coded as LLI on 2 different dates, right? Long flight, by the way, if you've done the math on that, right? Well, depending on what time zone LLI is in, right? So again, this is a very easy way to store pretty complex data, pretty complex arrays. The cool thing about Oracle is that inside an AJD instance, it's very easy to use something called Simple Oracle Document Access, or SODA. That's where the splash of soda comes from. And I'm going to actually just run through these slides real quickly. I'm going to save these as, if you will, reference information for you, because I'm going to go demo this live. So let me go do that real quickly. Let's see, I'll stop right here and demo for you in real time Oh, I got to sign in again. Just give me a minute. Let me capture my password real quickly. There it is. No, you can't see it. And I'm logging into the Oracle database actions, which comes up, by the way, if you want to see this. Here is my, let me just log in here real quickly. My AJD database, which will take just a second to log in. Again, I'm doing this all inside the cloud, of course, because it's an autonomous JSON database. But I built an autonomous JSON database right here called, right here, it should be coming up in just a second. There it is, AJD 21. Notice I've got, that says it's a JSON database. I've got an ATP instance and an ADW instance as well. And if I drill into this, there's a little tab here called Tools. And from here, I can get to the database actions SQL subset of tools. So what I'm going to do real quickly is run some code. This is what's called SODA, right? So again, this is a general purpose set of commands that I can use in several different languages. So I'm going to first drop the collection. And now if you notice, if I come back over here, the collection no longer exists. I'm going to create a new collection called aircraft. Okay. So we'll go run this real quickly. You'll notice that I now have a new collection called aircraft. Well, how many collections do I actually have? Let's go take a look. Oh, there's one called travel info and another one called aircraft. Travel info we're going to look at a little bit later. It's one I already created. But notice that if you look at the attributes, look at that. ID created on last modified version, JSON document. Well, wait a minute. Where are the columns? They are inside the JSON document. Really, the this is the JSON collection. It's really a table. That's really what it is, with some other stuff wrapped around it. More on that in just a minute. Now, I'm going to add 5 elements, 5 documents into this JSON collection, right? And I'll just do that real quickly. And you'll notice that down here in a second, 5 documents have been inserted successfully. Well, what about getting data out of that? Well, how about if I want to say everything that is manufactured by Boeing? Note that I'm using the get collection name filter SODA command to actually pull this out. Check this out. This is one of the things I love about JSON. What I'm passing into the filter argument, if you will, the filter parameter, is itself a JSON document. Do you see that? It's a string value pair. So let me just run this real quickly and check it out. Okay, there are 2, which matches up with what I've got here, 2 and only 2 documents that contain Boeing as the manufacturer. How about everybody that, or all aircraft, let's scroll that up a bit, that have a ceiling of greater than 40,000 feet. So I'll just run this real quickly. Okay. And by the way, notice I've got several other key value pairs here, or string value pairs, that are not included in each of these JSON documents. I've got a max cargo capacity string value pair, a biofuel capable, and also a ceiling attribute. Well, that one's in every one, right? So here, when I go ahead and select everybody that's got a ceiling greater than 40,000 feet, well, guess what? There's only one that doesn't match, and that's the Beechcraft here. So 4 rows were selected. And then finally, well, geez, this looks kind of complex. I don't want to go learn a new language. You don't have to. You can use SQL. Check this out. I'm basically accessing information inside that JSON container, looking at all the documents saying, hey, only show me stuff that has a tail ID, which is really the identifier, right, for each of the aircrafts, the unique identifier, the primary key value, if you will. And if I run this as SQL, holy cripes, look at that. Yeah. By the way, notice that biofuel capable for one of these simply comes back as null. Huh? Yeah, I didn't put any value in for it. I don't have to. So again, JSON's very flexible in this regard. The beautiful thing is with the way it's implemented in an AJD database, is that you've got an extremely flexible way of accessing JSON documents. It's actually, as we're going to get into it here, an OSON data type. More on that coming up in a second. But back to my slides for a minute. Hopefully, by the way, if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I will definitely get to them. But I wanted to just share with you real quickly how easy it is to get to everything I've showed you so far here on the slides is basically what I just demoed. How easy it is to use.
Jim, I have a question. Is this
Yes.
AJD available in the free tier of the Oracle Cloud?
In the, I missed
Free,
that. I missed
the free tier.
Yes, it is.
It is
definitely.
Okay,
yes,
cool.
As far as I know, it is. I think they either added it recently, or I'm pretty sure it is. I'm almost 100% sure it is.
Thank you.
Because great question, good question. We've got plenty of time here, so if somebody does want to jump in with a question, I'll check chat when we're all done here. But great point. Yeah, this is all inside OCI, right? This is an autonomous database instance, because you know why? It's really an ATP instance with some limits on it. I'll show you more about that in our last few slides. So let's say you don't want to use SODA, right? Inside, well, that's too limiting. What if I want to use Node.js, Python, Java, other? Guess what? Chapter 5 of the Autonomous JSON Database documentation using AJD. Chapter 5 has examples of how to use it with all of those different languages. And as we're going to see, guess what? We can also use PL SQL. If you're an old school DBA like me, well, I'm really a developer. I just used to be a DBA, right? When I'm not falling off my bicycle. I like playing with this. This is a really neat tool. So let's talk a little bit about how we would normally implement this, right? If I was a typical DBA and you brought me this data information, I'd say, no, kid. Old school DBA, right? Kid. If I had still smoking. You're going to need 3 instances, 3 tables, right? And here's how I would lay it out. Well, okay, fine. Can you imagine why people want to go around their DBAs, right? As someone once said, DBAs stood for basically don't bother asking, because DBAs traditionally have said, wait a minute, there's got to be some controls over things. I can understand why it's much easier when I tell you that this is really underneath the covers, how it's stored, right? So if I create a table called traveler info and I use these columns in exactly this definition, this is basically the DDL that gets executed when I said SODA create traveler info. It basically builds 5 columns. One of them is a JSON document blob column. Note, there's a check constraint saying the document must be JSON and specifically format OSON, Oracle JSON. I guess OJSON wouldn't have worked very well. So we'll talk more about OSON in a little bit. I've got some additional documentation on it, but it's kind of obscured here a little bit. But note that store as secure file. If you know how lobs work inside Oracle, that means that we have the ability to encrypt secure data. So by default, in fact, no way to turn this off in an AJD instance. These data are encrypted, okay? A little bit more on OSON coming up, as I mentioned. But another thing is, notice those 4 other columns. ID created on last modified version. Yeah, this thing automatically registers each document uniquely. And yes, it's possible to have document A with more than 1 version. Yeah, and we automatically track when it was created and when it was last modified. The AJD environment tracks this automatically for you. So you've got excellent control over these documents. I got no problem with JSON. I don't, okay? The challenge I find is people don't think enough about security and they don't think enough about control of these documents. So the beautiful thing about SODA collections is it gives us excellent metadata control. Now, what I wanted to do is ramp this up a bit. So my colleague and friend, ex-patriot from Oracle, Dominic Giles, wrote this really cool thing called Data Generator. And he had an example of it here. I modified it a bit. If anyone's interested, I can certainly drop the code for you. But I basically built a JSON document, about 500,000 rows. And I generated that data to a flat file, a JSON document, right? And in about, no kidding, 2 seconds, it built 500,000 rows. Yeah, it's all written in Java. Dominic's got a new tool I think he calls Bench Builder, which is going to take some of the aspects of the old swing bench and data generator aspects. I'm still working with him on that a bit, but extremely fast to build really randomized data. So I built 500,000 JSON documents, not rows per se, really JSON documents, right? And I loaded them up into an OSON document collection. First, I built a credential. I'm not going to get into how to build credentials, right? But you can look up the documentation on what type of credential you'll need to set up for this, right? Because there are different types of credentials in OCI. I copied the file called travelerinfo.json into object storage, and then I used the copy collection procedure of DBMS Cloud to load those 500,000 rows. They loaded in less than 45 seconds. Not too shabby, extremely easy to use, right? The trickiest part in my mind is getting the credentials set up. That's the trickiest part. But once you get around that, that's not a big deal. By the way, when it loads the data, if you've worked with external tables in the OCI environment, you'll be completely comfortable and familiar with this. Every time any operation happens with an external table or with a collection being copied in, it generates a log file and a bad file. So notice I had 12 failed attempts, right? It took me a little bit to get my JSON document built properly, my set of JSON documents, right? Because remember, there's a check constraint there. And I had an ill-formed JSON document. Once I got that fixed, I had a couple of misplaced OG brackets and things like that. Everything was fine. And it tells me that, hey, I was able to load X number of rows. Here's the data source that I drew from, JSON document, right? Those other 4 columns come in automatically. There's also, as I mentioned, a bad file as well to see in case there were any errors, anything that might have been rejected for whatever reason, right? But that's basically it. It's extremely simple to get data loaded. And if you want to do it in bulk, that's the way to do it. What if you want to do it a different way? We'll get to that in just a second. Let's talk about what's inside this document. There's a function, I think this is 18C or early 19C, JSON_serialize. If I access a JSON document and I want to see natively what does it look like, and I've just got a little sampling here, I can use JSON serialize to show, hey, here's what the document is actually stored as within that blob. So that's what JSON serialize does, right? It just returns the raw contents of each JSON document, essentially as if they were rows inside a table, because that's basically what they are. That's the way to think about it. But if I want to drill into the data, remember I said there were some other columns there, I should say string value pairs, right? It's a little bit different technology or terminology. If I want to drill into the bio data array, and there's basically 3 columns, string value pairs, blood type, gender, and pronouns, right? Now, again, blood type, I hate to tell you this, that's a sensitive field, right? That's medical information. Right off the bat, here in the US, we would say this is HIPAA, Health Information Privacy something Act, right? It's protected data, but these days gender and pronouns are also getting to be sensitive data for some people, right? So in this particular case, right, I'm glad that I'm using AJD because it's automatically encrypted data, right? The only way to get to it is through the database. But see how easy it is to access this? Notice I'm accessing that array by just putting an asterisk in there. And there's only one piece of information in that array. By the way, it's the 0th, not the first, the 0th piece of information in that array. We start with 0, 1, 2, and you'll see that in just a second, right? But so in this case, if I put an asterisk in there, it's saying, give me everything. Well, in this case, there's only 1, so here you go. But What if I wanted to go after something where there are multiple values? So in that flight history array, there's actually two different string value pairs, one for airport and one for flight date. And notice I'm saying, show me flight date 0, the 0th instance, the first instance, and the second instance. Well, there is no second instance. What happens when I run this query for these 10 keys between, and by the way, that's the internal ID, right? A column string value pair called ID between 3030 and 3010. Here's what I get out. First thing, notice that because I said asterisk for airports, I get the contents of the array. But if I hit, because I had said flight date 0, I get the 0th, really the first, if you will, occurrence, and the second occurrence. And why is that all null? Because there was no third occurrence yet. It's possible at some point that, again, the whole intent here is I've got a departure and arrival airport. Well, what if this is a multi-leg flight? There might be in a certain case where I might have a third and a fourth and a fifth flight record, right? Depending on how I wanted to define my data. But in this case, notice that flight history third, second if we subscript it, right? But the third occurrence of flight record, right? Or flight history information is null. No errors thrown, no issues. That's one of the neat things about JSON. It is a dual-edged sword, of course, right? Because of I do have to think about, well, what if I need to have a specific value and not null value? That gets a little bit more interesting, right? Because again, the flexibility becomes, in a way, its weakness, if as long as you understand what you're going after. So anyway, very easy to access information once it's been loaded. I can use SQL to get to it. And if I can build SQL, can I build views? Sure. Can I join it to other data? We're going to get to that in just a minute. I'm going to show you real quickly, by the way, another way to manage these collections. SODA. We have those SODA commands, right? Guess what? They've also built a package, a PL SQL package called DBMS SODA. I'm going to go through this a little quickly. I just want to show you, I could also use DBMS SODA.drop collection to drop a collection, to create a new collection. And by the way, this DBMS SODA also exists in an ATP instance. Talk about that in just a little bit. Notice here, really all I would have to do here is say truly collection name. That's all I really need here. And see, they've also got some other information about metadata and create mode. For an AJD database, I don't even need to specify this. But in an ATP instance, there are other things that can be specified for that. More on that when we talk about the difference between an AJD and an ATP instance. Here's an example of opening a collection. Notice that I declare a column called SOCO-col of SODA collection T type. That's the collection type, right? If you will, the boundaries of the document collection, the JSON collection. I also have a SODA document T type, which is a document. And then a couple of other columns that I'm going to use to access and handle loading data inside here. Could I do this one row at a time? Yeah. Here's one of the key things about the OSON format. I have to use the utilraw.cast-to-raw function to encode the data. And the reason is that the character set is maintained inside the document. That's one of the strengths, actually, one of the positive features of the OSON format, right? So the reason I have to cast to raw is because I'm actually keeping the raw data exactly the way it is. There's no character set translation here for the blob content that's going to go inside this SODA document. Notice I use a function called insert one to insert one and only one document, one and done. Commit the change for document with an ID of 500,001. Great, let's move on. I can also insert and retain information about the document for whatever purposes. So here I've kind of abbreviated the call to create the second JSON document to load and create the second one. But then notice I can also use a function called Getkey to get the auto-generated key for the JSON document. And then I can actually retrieve that document into yet another version of the JSON document content, right? Notice that I have to use util raw cast to varchar to get the data out, wrapping that around the get blob returned results. Because remember, character set coding is maintained. What's all this other stuff? Remember all that metadata I talked about, right? That Oracle automatically stores the key value, which is really a UUID for each of the documents, when it was created, last modified, and its version. Let me show you what comes out of that. Yeah, you see how that all is related? Now remember, the key is not the same thing as the ID column. The ID column, there is really a column, really. It's a string value pair, ID 500,001, right? This key, and also notice the version is coded essentially the same. That's a UUID, right? In other words, this document within this collection is unique. I could have a second version of that. So the implication here is I can also update a document and have a second version, a third version, a fourth version, and that version would actually change. That's a topic for a different, deeper dive. But you can see that all this stuff is maintained automatically within the AJD database within this JSON collection. So let's talk about how do we actually leverage some of this? Well, one other thing I want to tell you about is you can create what's called a data guide, which requires something called a search index. It's a CTX sys type of index, really a text-based or a domain index. This is the command I basically used to do it. Create search index, index name on that particular document for JSON. Once I do that, then I call dbms soda open collection to open the collection and create something called a data guide. Now, the reason for the data guide will become evident in a few more minutes. But here's basically what it puts out. It's a data guide. The idea here is that if I say I want to search through a JSON collection, through all the JSON documents inside there, this essentially maps what's available to me, including the metadata about the string value pairs, maximum length, data type, and so forth, right? And that becomes important when we start trying to do more complex filtering and, more importantly, joining to non-JSON data. I'll show you that in just a few minutes too. So the data guide, that's just something, this is the way to create it. I'll show you the results of leveraging that data guide, which uses that index, in just a few more minutes. So, great, Jim. I love JSON. But you know what? Dude, I got a ton of other data inside my database. It's not JSON. What am I going to do? Maybe you got stuff like this, an airports table. It basically, remember, you know, all airports have what's called an IATA code. So EWR is Newark, right? AMR? I'm trying to remember what the code is for Schiphol. I think it's AMR. CDG, Charles de Gaulle, right? FRA, Frankfurt. ORD, Chicago. Anybody interested? I'll tell you why it's called ORD. You put that in the chat if you're interested, I'll tell you. Anyway, let's assume that I have a table like this, right? Notice this is not a JSON document. By the way, note it's also got an interesting little thing here, an AP geolocation column of type STO geometry. Huh, why am I going to use that? I'll show you. It's really cool. I'm going to take that column called AP geolocation and code it for latitude and longitude. So I can use it for Oracle geographic information systems. Why might I want to do that? By the way, once I've gotten the latitude and longitude for each of these airports, I'm going to set inside that AP geolocation column the point on the surface of the Earth that that airport is actually located at. Why? So I can figure out distances between airports. So once I've got this, I now have everything that I need to do geolocation and calculate, well, how far is it from Schiphol to Charles de Gaulle for this particular flight? You know, if you're a flyer, miles matter, right? You know, points. Yeah. So again, that's one of the reasons we might be doing this, or to look for anomalies or all other kinds of things, or just to plot a flight on a map, whatever it might be. Let's put it all together. This one looks a little complex. I don't expect you to absorb this. That's why we're recording, right? But I'm taking data from the traveler info collection, joining it to that airports table twice, because I've got the flight history 0 flight airport, and the flight history 1 airport is the destination airport. And see that one column there where I'm doing the, or I should say that one line, I'm saying SDOGeom.SDO distance. I'm actually calculating the distance between the two airports in miles. I could also change it to kilometers if I wish to, right? As the number of miles flown. And so here's a sampling of the result from this query. And you'll notice that, yeah, okay, here I am flying from Newark, New York City, to Amsterdam, AMS, not AMR, right? I believe that's Schiphol, if I remember correctly. If not, correct me. Please notice that the number of miles flown is always the same. It better be, once the airport's moving while we're flying. If I had a different sampling of data, right? This is just the sample I grabbed out because I wanted to share with you. Yeah, I used randomized data here, right? So boy, poor person that spent 79.5 hours flying from Newark to Amsterdam. Wow, must have been some real headwinds there. Again, this is randomized data. Of course, it doesn't take that long to fly. It's about, what, 8 hours, maybe 6 hours in a good day, right? My point is, and I do have one, that the miles flown here stays the same because we're able to calculate points on a map, right? If I had a different sampling of a person, right, flights they had taken over time, of course I see differences between the two airports. The point I'm trying to make here is it's very easy to join data together with existing data, right? What's the point of having a JSON document repository if you can't join it to other non-JSON data? Simple example of exactly how we could do that. Here's another example. Let's take that same SQL statement, and this time I'm going to throw the name of the passenger inside it, converting this into a simple view. The only thing that's different here, folks, is the fact that I'm using a view and I'm adding in the passenger name. Why would I do that? So that I could do a query like this. Show me everything from that view where the departure airport is Newark, the arrival airport's either Frankfurt or Charles de Gaulle in Paris, and the passenger name is whatever, Horger in this case, right? So this is what I want to find. Very simple thing. Why might I be querying this? Hey, we've got a problem with this passenger, right? This passenger we need to look up. Maybe this could be a security issue. Maybe this could be a miles flown issue. Don't know, don't care. The point is, it's very easy with that view to produce a sweet little report, which I'm not going to show you because I'm going to tell you something. It returns one row. What I wanted to share with you here is, here's an example of what Oracle goes through underneath the covers in the execution plan to run this statement. Notice that domain index that I've got red boxed there is actually an example of how the search index, which we generated, right, as part of that helper for the data searches, right, that it actually is able to take advantage of that particular domain index to filter out very quickly only the possible person, Horger, could be more than one, right, named that way, could be a family traveling for all we know, and their departure and their arrival airport. My point is, all of this stuff is happening on underneath the covers when you run that little query. It's pretty complex stuff. This is really sweet stuff that it's able to pull together. I find this fascinating that Oracle is able to glue things together very quickly. So when would I consider using ATP instead of AJD? Well, here's the idea. AJD is cheaper, significantly cheaper. I'm not going to get into exact pricing on it, right? You can take a look at that if you want to, but there are some limitations. If I'm using AJD, I'm limited to only 20 gigabytes of non-JSON data. I remember when a gigabyte was a lot of data. Today, it's nothing, right? It's nothing today. Also note, for AJD, I am not allowed to put non-JSON data in a SOTA collection. SOTA collections can hold other types of JSON data and non-JSON data. Remember I talked about that metadata attribute? Yeah, I can store other type of JSON-like information inside a SOTA collection, another type of document format. Can't do it in AJD, but I can in an ATP instance. And finally, the OSON format, right, which remember I talked to you about, had some character set improvements and stuff and so forth, right? I can only use OSON inside AJD. If I got to use a different format, JSON, or I've got one of these other limitations, then it's time to think about creating an ATP instance. Except I don't need to create an ATP instance. I can simply promote it to an ATP instance. So what I'm going to show you here is I took my AJD 21 database, right? My AJD database instance, created a clone of it as a full backup, doesn't have a lot of data in here. It took only a few seconds to go ahead and create that clone, and I created it as a backup called AJD 21 Promo, essentially creating a new AJD database. Not too big, it's pretty cheap to do this, right? And literally it took no more than 2 minutes because there's not a lot of data in it, right? Just simply very easy to update. But notice that at this point, I now have a new AJD instance called AJD 21 Promo. And now I can say, please change the workload type to transaction processing. It's a nicer, warmer, more friendly Oracle corporation these days, isn't it? When was the last time your salesperson actually told you it's going to cost you more? Check this out. It actually says, hey, we're going to change your billing. We're going to start charging you OCPU per hour, and we're going to start charging you for Exadata storage. Are you sure? When was the last time your salesperson said, do you really want to pay more money? Right? Most people, when I talk to, about Oracle, and they go, I hate Oracle. What they really mean is, I hate my salesperson. He lied to me once. And my response would be, only once. The point I'm trying to make here is, one click does it. I simply clicked on convert. Takes a few minutes. Again, I don't have a huge amount of data here. And literally in under 2 minutes, if you take a look at the timestamps here, it was done. It was done in under 2 minutes. Essentially, all that I'm doing is really taking some limits off that AJD instance and really transforming it into an ATP instance. So hopefully I've given you some interesting information here. How does this compare up against other things? I am not a MongoDB expert. I understand how it works. But Beta Hammerschmidt, who works for Oracle, did a really sweet blog post on this. And you can look at everything inside here, but this is a pretty interesting case. Taking the same data, loading it up into an AJD instance versus MongoDB Atlas, and the different things it could do. Notice, I've got a JSON search index. Ain't got nothing like that in MongoDB. Now, again, this blog post is a few months old. Things could have changed, so check his blog post out. I've got a link to it right there. But note that there's a whole bunch of things here. For me, the compelling part is $2.74 an hour versus $3.95 an hour. If you're going to be doing a lot of document processing, right? And again, we got some limits on an AJD instance. That looks pretty interesting to me. I mean, that's $1.25 US cheaper, almost $1.20 cheaper. That's not too bad. That's a significant savings. Now, again, that's Beta's perspective. I haven't done an in-depth attempt on this, but still pretty sweet, pretty compelling case for it. And with that, I'm basically ready for your questions. I do have some great documentation, by the way. One of the things I'd suggest taking a look at if you want to understand OSON and the reasons for it, there's a brief blog here. If you look at these two links at the very bottom, a brief blog, but there's also an in-depth, essentially clinical paper that was presented at, I think, the VLDB Congress last November, I believe, by one of the authors explaining how OSON actually works. The whole point of OSON is extremely fast text searches, right? The ability to look through data much more quickly and filter out data effectively that other JSON engines essentially don't have. I've also got some additional documentation on using SOTA and some of the things that you might want to consider. This is like a whole new language, folks. There's so much more that you can learn about this. It's really amazing what Oracle's built inside this. And I look forward to experimenting with this in the future alongside you. With that, I am finished. Does anyone have any questions? Shall I take a look at the Q&A? I see no open questions at this point.
No open questions. And since we're with a rather small group, if it's okay with you, we'll allow people to talk.
Mm-hmm. Please do. I've done enough talking.
Okay, I'll allow everybody to unmute.
And you can just say hi if you want to. That's all right too. I miss all you folks in Europe.
Hi there.
Hi.
We talked with you about it.
Yeah, I know.
Seriously, any questions? Yeah.
I still got one question left. Is can you elaborate a little bit more on the document character types? I guess I'm not using JSON explicitly like this, okay, but I do every now and then have my personal fight with the diacritics. You know, the all the regular letters with the special dots and scratches and stars.
Sure.
Over and under.
Lots and yeah, French with three like different E's. As I understand it, and you know what, if you would do me a favor, hang on a second. Please shoot me an email on this and I will follow up and get it back to everybody on your team. Okay, let me pull up Mr. Jim's email information right there.
All right.
But shoot me an email on this so I don't forget. But as I understand it, instead of storing the JSON in a specific like UTF-8 character set, the document itself is stored in its native character set. That's my understanding. So that's number one. Number two, I don't know how that would relate to, like, if you're trying to search, for example, my last name, Czuprynski, actually in Polish, it has like a little, almost a tilde over the N. And so if you were searching for someone, one of my relatives in Poland, and yes, I do have relatives there, with that diacritical, I'm not sure how that would work. That's an interesting case. Now I have a new use case. So is that what we were talking about and how that would work with searching for it?
Exactly, and entering and comparing and sorting and
yeah. That's a great question.
Jim, isn't the JSON column stored in a blob for exactly that issue? So there will be no character conversions.
Exactly. Right.
It's binary. It's not character class object.
That's my understanding. Exactly right. It's stored in native format. Now, again, how that works with the search indexes, and the document, what do we call that thing? I forget. There's a document map, right? How that works in concert with the search index. Like if I search for somebody with that, wacky diacritical over the N in my last name, how that would work for comparisons and especially sorting, right? I don't know. That's a great question. I would imagine it would handle that problem though, right? I would imagine it would handle it, but without experimentation, I do not have a specific answer.
I'll send you the mail, and I'm very anxious to see whatever you can dig up about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've never gotten that before.
Let me warn you, Wouter sends very long mails.
Well,
Sorry,
that's great. Hey, detail is important. Details are really important. Yeah, that's a really great one, especially when dealing with, another thing I haven't really thought about is some of the Oriental is not the right word, ideogrammatic languages, right? That could also be a challenge, especially with Mandarin or with Japanese or Arabic.
Huh?
Yeah, that could be, wow. And again, I don't know any of those three well enough to put that in, but it would be an interesting problem. Not yet. Working on Mandarin, but
no, we'll look into that. Because
that's a great question.
I cannot even show a Mandarin document on my computer. It will just simply not show because I have no character sets matching that, and they're only supported in UTF-32 or something.
Yes, right. I see what you're saying. Interesting.
So
and
it would be nice to know that the document will be stored in its native format, but I will not be able to read it unless my browser or whatever is able to implement the character set.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
But you will not be able to read it even if it displays correctly.
That's correct. That's true.
Yeah. That'd be interesting. That's a great question. Yeah, because I wasn't even thinking about that, because I'm just thinking about how do I implement this, but anybody else?
I see Rick has unmuted himself. Aha. No question?
No question.
I have a question. Has anybody become magnetized because they've gotten their vaccine? That apparently is a big concern here in the US this week.
I had some trouble putting down my spoon yesterday, but didn't have to do anything with magnetism, I guess.
Yeah, we were joking about this, folks, before we got started, that there was a lady testifying, a doctor testifying in front of one of our state legislatures, who was saying that I've seen pictures on the internet of people putting a key on their forehead because they've been magnetized. And, here's problem number one. Number one, the human body is notoriously hard to magnetize, which is why we have MRIs. And number two, keys are typically not made of magnetic metal. So it's just like, honey, we have a comedian here in the United States whose punchline is simply, you can't fix stupid. It's just, and it's just like, take all these vaccine dosages and please give them to folks in India who actually really would like them, or anybody in Europe that would like them. Because I'm telling you, wow, wow. Anyway, things with you guys. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Besides political commentary from the United States, I apologize. We have any right to complain.
We can take that out of the recording.
Yeah, we'll take that. No. It's just been
okay.
It's not really politics as much as it's just like, as Ripley said in Aliens, have IQs dropped sharply since I've been away? And the answer is yes. Anyway. Well, I guess we're all set. This has been recorded. You can strip that off the recording if you wish. But thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this, and I hope you folks will ask me back for some. I've got several other presentations in the pipeline. Let me know if you'd like to see them.
If you would like to send me the presentation, I'll make a PDF and send it out to all the people who joined us today. So they can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, folks.
And
thanks.
That concludes
guys.
today's session. Hope to see you next week. But I guess it's Job doing something.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna check.
DBM job, but
Job. Critical success factors for migrating your Oracle environment to the cloud. So be sure to join there. Jim, you're welcome to join there as well, but you have to register.
Thank you. We're ramping up for Kscope, so I may not have the time, but
okay.
See you guys all at Kscope, I hope.
Okay.
Thanks.